Welcome and hello. Welcome to the Go Plan video library that includes Greenleaf Financial Fitness Series and other financial professional series involved with personal financial wellness. This series, along with other videos, will be posted on our Go Plan YouTube channel, websites, and other social media outlets. My name is Jim Hiles, and as your host, I think it's important to highlight what financial wellness is and how tools like Go Plan 101 can help Americans achieve their goals and wishes. So what is financial wellness? It is defined as the overall financial health of an individual. What it does for you is probably most important. It helps you increase understanding all things related to money. It can also help decrease stress, help you make better decisions, and perhaps most importantly, keep you on track as things change in the future. What's Go Plan 101? Well, Go Plan 101 combines web technology and educational content with behavioral change solutions, free software, and a huge resource center full of focused responses. Translation? Simple. Go Plan 101 is a cool site that helps people deal with their money issues so they can do what they want to do. And you also have the capability on our site to talk to a coach or go right to the resource. At the end of the day, financial wellness is only as good as the actions taken. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the video.
That's 99% of the time, that's what people do. You do have an alternative, though. You can have a springing power of attorney, which simply means that incapacity must be established before it becomes effective. So there's just an extra layer there before that becomes effective.
Got it. Anyone who's been to the hospital anytime recently has probably seen some has probably been asked the question if they have an advance directive for healthcare or a living will. So talk a little bit about how important this is for a family to consider to make sure that things get done smoothly.
Right. It's very important. Most people don't want to linger unnecessarily if things are dire, and medical interventions really are not going to improve your life, the quality of your life. And so this gives the medical professionals authority to withhold medication and treatment and to authorize pain-relieving medication. The other important part of it is that it designates a healthcare representative to make decisions about your health only when you can't. And this person also must follow the provisions of your living will. These two documents, the power of attorney and the living will or the advance directive for healthcare, will usually eliminate the need for a guardianship proceeding, because if you don't have these documents and an individual becomes incapacitated, medical emergency or otherwise, your family is left with having to go for a guardianship proceeding, which is much more complicated and expensive.
Sure, and painful probably for people going through the issues that they might be going through.
Right,
so
right.
It's also important that people know where this is located, right? So not just enough to have one. You better get your hands on it.
Right. With any of these documents, with your will, power of attorney, advance directive for healthcare, you want to make sure you keep them in a safe place. You want to make sure that people know where they are. Often people will put them in a safe deposit box in the bank, but you have to make sure that your fiduciaries have the ability to access your safe deposit box.
Okay, important. And as far as trusts, I get a lot of questions. I mean, we always do. People asking about trusts, if they should have a trust. And why don't we talk a little bit about what trusts do, what they can do, and what they can't do?
Sure. So first of all, what is a trust? A trust is a document. It is its own entity, has a tax ID number. It provides who the beneficiaries are. It provides who the trustee is. The trustee is the person who manages the trust. Assets are actually transferred into the name of the trust, and then they're held by the trust. The document is going to dictate the distributions to the beneficiaries. Under what circumstances will beneficiaries receive distributions? Typically, it's health, education, maintenance, and support. It also provides for the disposition of the assets. Maybe there will be, 30% at age 25. It also provides what happens if the beneficiary passes away, who is then going to receive the trust assets.
Got it. Okay. And there's different types of trusts, right? So why don't we get into that a little bit and tell us about the different kinds of trusts? Start with revocable.
Sure. A lot of people ask me about revocable trusts, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard of these. They're very common. This is a trust that's created while you're alive. You can be revoked by you, amended by you at any time. You have control. The advantages are to hold all of your assets in one place and name a trustee to manage those assets. While you have capacity, you certainly can be the trustee as well. The biggest advantage why people create them is to avoid probate. Probate is a process where you submit the will and you make the distributions. It can be complicated. It can be expensive depending on what state you're in. In New Jersey, probate's not difficult, so we don't see these as much in New Jersey.
Right.
One advantage for anyone, if you have property in another state, it's a good idea to create these for that property so you don't have to do a probate in another state. It's important to recognize what revocable trusts don't do. They don't protect you from estate or inheritance taxes. They don't protect you from creditors. And they don't protect you from qualifying for Medicaid benefits, which I'm going to get into in a few minutes.
Right, which makes sense. It's revocable, so otherwise you can just move it out, move it back in,
right,
whatever you want.
You're treated as the owner. Right,
Got
exactly.
It. Okay, which leads us to the irrevocable trust, right?
So an irrevocable trust means that once you create this trust, you put your assets into the trust. You can't alter it. You can't dissolve it. You can't say, hey, you know what? I don't want to have this trust anymore. Give me all those assets back. You can't do it.
No do-overs.
No do-overs. It's a gift. You're making a gift to the trust, okay? Why would you do that? Why would you make this trust? For estate tax purposes. So if you want to reduce your taxable estate, if you're subject to estate taxes, this will get money out of your estate for the benefit of your heirs or your beneficiaries, your children or whomever. It can also be done for Medicaid planning, again, which I'll get into in a few minutes. It protects your beneficiaries from themselves, from spending the money, especially if someone's younger and they don't appreciate how quickly you can go through money. Protects from creditors. Some people are more prone to having to worry about that. Maybe a physician who's worried about being sued or anyone. Also divorce. It would protect the assets in the event of a divorce.
Got it. Okay. And then they have to be discretionary for all of us,
correct.
Right?
So in order to be protected, to offer that protection, it must be discretionary. And that just means that the trustee has the discretion on whether to distribute the assets. Again, based on that standard typically of health, education, maintenance, and support.
Got it. Okay. More trusts. We'll talk about supplemental needs or special needs.
Right. This is for someone who's receiving a disability benefit, which are typically means tested. And that way it enables them to receive an asset, whether it's an inheritance, a gift, or a settlement, yet still qualify for those benefits. So it's very important that they not be disqualified from receiving their benefits. It's supplemental. It enhances their life. The money can be used for getting a special vehicle for a handicapped person or things like that, but it's not going to replace the benefit they're receiving. Testamentary trust, that simply means that's a trust that's created under your will. The trust does not come into effect until you pass away. So you might want to have a trust for your minor children. That does not come into effect until you pass away.
Got it. Now, next is probate, and this gets us into more ownership, asset titling, and beneficiaries again. So why don't we kind of hit on how probate affects that?
So probate assets, those are assets that your will is going to dictate how those assets are going to pass. They're a part of your probate estate. So those are any assets that you own, either outright or with a joint tenant, but without a right of survivorship, and where there's no designated beneficiary. So that becomes part of your probate estate and is passed by the terms of your will. Non-probate assets are where there's a beneficiary designation, like a life insurance policy or your retirement account, or anything that's owned jointly with rights of survivorship. They pass outside the terms of the will. This is significant, and it's really important to tie these two in together to make sure your assets pass the way that you want. Because if you name someone as a beneficiary on an account, that is who is going to receive that asset regardless of what your will says. And that might be fine, but it might not be in line with what you want. For example, if you want your children to share in your assets 50-50, you want to make sure check your beneficiary designations and make sure that that's the way they're set up.
Got it. So remember, we're talking about family and finances here. So if we're dealing with probate, it probably means that there's been a death in the family, and taking care of these things when people are alive might be a little unpleasant, but passing away without these things being taken care of can be a much bigger issue, right?
Absolutely. It's really important. It's something people often don't like to think about. They're difficult, difficult things to think about, and sometimes they're difficult decisions to make. But the important thing is to make the best decision you can today, and get your will done, get your documents done, and you can always change them later.
Right. Don't leave it to the courts.
Absolutely.
Right. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about more decisions to make.
Okay.
The importance of and the duties of executors and trustees. Let's start with executors.
Yeah. So it's very important when you're determining who your executor is. They might also be called the personal representative. And this person is going to play a major role in managing your estate after you're gone. You can name an individual. You can name a corporation, a bank. They submit the will to probate. They gather the assets, pay valid debts of the estate. They distribute the bequest to the beneficiaries. They manage and preserve the assets. They have to make sure that the tax returns are filed, the income tax returns, as well as any estate or inheritance tax returns. So they're going to want to, consult with professionals to do this, a lawyer to help them through the process, as well as CPA and financial advisors as well.
Right. So it's important to know that the executor, don't think that you're naming an executor that needs to do all of these things by him or herself.
Correct.
Right. They're allowed to, and probably encouraged in most cases, to hire other professionals to help them with these things.
Absolutely.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Now, what about a trustee?
So a trustee, similarly to an executor, they manage the trust assets. So if you have a trust, this person is going to be managing the trust. They're going to be the one who's going to be making the distributions to the beneficiaries in accordance with the terms of the trust. This individual also may be an individual or a corporate trustee. Both of these individuals have a fiduciary responsibility toward the beneficiaries. And what this means is that they have to act responsibly and in the best interests of the beneficiaries.
Okay. Now we have a lot of information to cover, so we're going to pick up the pace a little bit here, but talk quickly about estate tax and the exemption.
Right. So right now, there aren't a whole lot of people who are subject to the federal estate tax. The exemption right now is very high. It's $11.4 million per person, and it's twice that for a couple. This law will sunset in 2025, so there's the possibility that it could go back to the $5 million that it had been. So there is some planning you can do for that. In case it comes back, there is ways of getting assets out of your estate as a couple. There's some planning you can do. State taxes, however, some states still have an estate tax, and also some states have an inheritance tax. They're different. An inheritance tax is determined by the status of the beneficiary. Child is Class A, there's no inheritance tax. A friend is Class D, there is inheritance tax. So that's also something to be aware of depending on what state you're in.
Right. Important to be working with an attorney that knows the laws in your state.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. So gifting. There's some confusion here, but let's just hit the highlight.
Right. Well, some people are concerned with gifting. So as I mentioned before, if you're setting up an irrevocable trust, whatever you put in the trust is a gift. Or, well, what about taxes? Right now, a lot of people are aware of the annual exclusion, which is $15,000 per year that you can give to as many people as you want without having to file a gift tax return. The question is whether you owe tax. Right now, the lifetime exemption for gifting is $11.4 million, meaning you can gift $11.4 million over the course of your life and never pay gift taxes. So for most people, there's really no gift tax anymore. If you are in that range, if you have assets of $11.4 million or more, you file the gift tax return, it does chip away at your estate tax exemption.
Got it. With the lifetime exclusion. Now, step up in basis. This is important, I think. We should probably cover this a little bit. Assets, if assets are owned by someone who passes away, get a step up in basis to the date of death value, right?
So what is that? What does that mean? And that's another important consideration when you're looking at gifting. If you have an asset, let's say it's a stock that you bought, at $10 a share, and it's now $20 a share. Capital gains is based on the difference between your purchase price and the sales price. So if you sell that stock, if it was $10 when you bought it, it's $20 now, you're going to pay capital gains on the $10. When you pass away, you get what's called a stepped up basis to the date of death value. So when you pass away, the basis now becomes that $20. So your heirs sell the stock, they're not going to pay capital gains. And it's just an important thing to remember that some assets it's better to hold on to and own when you pass away because they're low basis assets. Whereas if you gift the asset, that person's going to get the same basis that you had. So if they sell it, they're going to have to pay capital gains.
Right. So hold on to the low basis assets for as long as possible. If you don't need to sell them, don't.
Right.
And you get the benefit of the step up in basis. Of course, there's exceptions, but that's the general rule,
right,
is to carefully consider that before you do it. Let's talk about elder care. Obviously, a lot of these subjects could be in webinars all to themselves, but if
yes,
we talk about elder law planning, Medicare, and Medicaid, there's often some confusion there. Medicare is what pretty much everybody gets. Medicaid, very few people get. That's a general statement, but what do you want to say?
Sure, yeah. I mean, this is a very complex area, and I'm just going to hit on a couple of points here. I bring up Medicare because Medicare does cover your medical needs when you're 65 and older. If you were to have a medical catastrophe or you had a health issue where you needed skilled nursing care, you needed aides, you needed more help, Medicare will cover you for about 100 days for rehabilitative purposes. Beyond that, they will not pay for that care, and that care can get very, very expensive. So unless you have long-term care insurance, you have to pay out of pocket. And then once you get down to a certain level, Medicaid will kick in, but it's a very low standard. It's $2,000. You have to be down to $2,000 or less in assets, and your income has to be below $2,315 per month. There are ways of planning for this, which often involves transferring assets. You have to bear in mind that Medicaid has a 5-year look back to see if there were any uncompensated transfers. And then they will create a period of ineligibility depending on how much you transferred.
Got it. Okay. And then the Medicaid irrevocable trust, not a common.
Well, no, some people do to preserve assets, but you have to bear in mind the 5-year look back. So the idea is to preserve these assets for your beneficiaries, your children, or whomever. And the goal, ideally what you do is you do it sooner rather than later because of the 5-year look back. And if you have enough, that if tomorrow you needed this care, you'd have enough to last you for 5 years.
Right.
Okay. And then those other assets are protected.
Got it. And then insurances, we get into, obviously, all these areas can affect how you leave your family with life insurance, long-term care, and disability. And each one of those has its own, if there's a premature death or for estate planning needs, those are reasons why you would want to make sure that you have life insurance and that it's the proper type of coverage. Long-term care, Margaret just mentioned, I mean, there's longevity risk. Growing segment of our population is living much longer, and those healthcare costs are skyrocketing, as we all know. And disability. Do you have disability at all? Who pays the premiums? Because that affects the taxability of it. And do you have enough? So,
right,
those are all things to consider.
Right.
So in summary, basically we start with, review your accounts and start with the titling of your accounts and who the beneficiaries are of those accounts. Make sure that you're up to date on those. And then you got to start thinking about who should be making healthcare decisions for me in case I'm incapacitated. Who would I want managing my assets and my affairs if I'm incapacitated or after I'm gone? And who would I want to be settling my estate? Obviously, you need to review your will or create a will if you don't have one. Should you consider trusts based on what we talked about earlier? And definitely do an insurance review of those insurances that we just talked about, life, disability, long-term care. Is there anything new popped into your head, Margaret?
Well, I would just say, it's important to do this planning. And it's, largely, it's not just to save, taxes and so forth, although that's part of it. It's also to make it easier for the people you leave behind. And even if you're not sure of your decisions, or it's an unpleasant topic, you shouldn't delay in doing it. And there are, professionals out there who can help guide you. I know a lot of this is, we've thrown a lot at you in this 30 minutes, and it seems daunting, but there are people out there who can help you, guide you through it. And it is important.
Thank you, and have a great day. And Margaret, thanks again for joining me.
Thank you.
So we covered a lot of ground, and let's just summarize. It's time to put this information to work. We live in a wonderful and a free country, but it's up to us to take responsibility and move forward, particularly on our personal financial wellness. So let's take some action here. Let's go and explore this financial stuff. Take a buddy with you if you need to. Have some fun. Learn a little or learn a lot about what you can do financially. These videos and websites, I hope you enjoy. I think they're great. But if you're like me, sometimes you just want someone to talk it out with. So seek out coaching from our site from professionals who've been vetted to provide you with complimentary initial consultations as being part of the Go Plan 101 experience. If you've not started your planning, or even if you have, use today's video to explore the area of concentration. Make sure you understand how it impacts you. My favorite quote is, life doesn't go in a straight line. You need to stay on top of it. So consider subscribing to our newsletter or our YouTube channel. Please reach out to me if you want more help or have questions. And lastly, thank you for listening. Now, go plan and go attain your financial wellness goals. Jim Hiles signing off for today. Take care.